Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see you again, as always, and it's lovely to have our wonderful guests here. We have our usual panellists, and also this week we have two new panellists, although one you have actually seen before. So let's just do some quick introductions. Sophie, if you just want to say who you are, and yeah, that'd be great.
So I'm Sophie. I work in the constituency office with Amanda for Derby North.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Henson, the Chief Executive of the East Midlands Ambulance Service.
And it's lovely to have you here for the first time. It's fantastic, Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Cal.
Hello, Cal Singh-Dinser, author, writer and poet from Derby. So I'm back again, yes.
And super lockdown hair winner as well.
Yes, thank you very much for that award.
Matt.
Yeah, hello Amanda again. How many weeks is it now?
13.
13. Crazy.
13.
I'm Councillor Matthew Holmes, Deputy Leader of the Council. And I've been doing this with you for 13 weeks.
13 weeks, really? It's been brilliant. I've loved it. I've loved seeing you for those 13 weeks. And then finally, Carl, but not finally.
My name is Carl Tring-Willis. I'm Community Development Manager at Derby City Council, working with the team that are responding to the current crisis.
Lovely, as always, to see you, Carl. It really is a great pleasure to see everybody. Right, well, let's get in then. Sophie, let's have our first question.
With GCSE exams likely to occur in the summer, how do you think schools will overcome the new challenges?
Oh, that's straight in there, isn't it? Matt, shall we come to you first on that?
Cal, do you want to dip in? I mean, you are, I would think, the best placed panellist for that. Would you mind giving us your...
Yeah, okay, then, Cal, yeah.
If that's all right.
I've got to be careful what I say. I obviously work in a school, so I'm not teaching at the moment. I am currently a science technician. But I was under the impression that in relation to GCSE exams and results, the teachers would come together and determine what grades were going to be given to the students. So in relation to actually sitting exams in summer, I'm not too familiar with that. I mean, where's that come from?
That was my impression. That was my impression as well, Amanda, that there'd be a lot of... I think there's a nuance between different age groups, but my understanding was that there was going to be assessments, as Cal's just said. I mean, obviously, I'm not a teacher. I aren't privy, but I would have thought that many teachers have coursework and can make assessments. But it is a difficult situation because, you know, I've seen on the news where there's been examples of assessments in previous years, and they actually overachieved those predicted grades, and that'd be the worry for me, that somebody that would potentially have got a grade above, and that means a hell of a lot for some people, because it can mean the difference between going to the university of choice and that kind of thing as well. So it is a big worry, but it's just one of those massive impacts of COVID, isn't it?
No, absolutely. My understanding is the same. I thought it was going to be predicted grades as well, actually. So I don't know who sent in the question, but maybe we can find out in any case on that. Richard, what about yourself? Do you have views on you know, what we should do over the summer with kids and sort of, you know, schooling?
I think it's really challenging, isn't it? We know COVID has impacted on everybody, be it directly or indirectly, and clearly there's lots of nervousness and anxiety. I think what we need to do is get some clear messages out, so people they know what the options are, they know what support is available to them, and also we have to remember that everybody's different. You know, there is not one size fits all, and we have to be able to adapt, and I think, you know, we have to make sure that we listen to all bits of society as well at this time, and we know even in the East Midlands there are areas which are affected differently at this stage to others. So it is challenging, but I think there's heaps of amounts of support available. We probably sometimes to help people you know, find it a bit easier.
I mean, there have been some announcements this afternoon, so that might be it. I was going to maybe just have a quick look, Sophie. It might have come out on that.
There's some great information, actually. Just quickly googled COVID exams, and there's some government pages that clearly go through some of the things we've just spoken about, but it gives a lot more detail as well. So there's a lot on there that if someone wants to actually have a look at what the impacts are and how they're going to deal with it, sixth forms and A levels and that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Carl, have you got any views on the impact? Have you seen the impact on anybody you know?
Obviously, I've got some friends and also colleagues who are working in the schools, and it has indeed been quite a challenging time. But they continue to follow the guidance that's issued and make sure that they adhere to that. And again, I think I was under the impression that the grades would be predicted, and those that weren't satisfied with that would be given the opportunity in the future to sit exams. So I suppose you could look out in some ways, perhaps get a better grade than you were anticipating. Who knows?
I don't know. I think for me, one of the concerns is, it is a big gap. What will it be? It would be 4, 5, 6 months. It's a long time to miss out on. And I suppose it's a disparity, isn't it, between some children who have been homeschooled, some who maybe not had IT available. It's a real problem, isn't it? I think.
From my point of view, my personal point of view, my 2 daughters, as you know, Amanda, are grown up now, and I mean, my youngest is still in education of sorts. She's at the Performance College in Leicester. Well, not at the moment. She's with us, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, I can imagine looking back what a worry it would be, and all the different things you have to think about when you've got kids at any level of school, and you've got worries about the safety of it and all those questions, and then the added worry about their education and their impact on that. Not just the education, but the mental side of things, as the impact mentally, as we all know, on interaction and just playing together and that kind of thing. There's a whole list of things which are a real worry, really, in terms of teenagers and younger children.
Yeah, we've talked about mental health issues a lot, and I know over the weeks. And Cal, I know it's a particular field of yours. Do you think it will have a mental health impact on young people?
It's definitely going to have an impact, especially the sixth formers, the teenagers that are about to make this next step from their college sixth form years to university or apprenticeships or whatever. There'll be a lot going through their minds, anticipating these results that are going to come within the next month or so. So there's a lot of pressure on them. And I'm just hoping that the teachers and the school staff will have done their jobs adequately and efficiently to make sure that every child gets what they deserve for the effort that they've put in. Obviously, there's going to be some cases where certain students don't get the grade they thought they were going to get, or, it's not going to be perfect, but it's the best that we can do considering what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but it's the best we can do. Thank you. Sophie, shall we have the next question, please?
Yeah, so we've got, as we discussed, making roads more cycle and pedestrian friendly, how do we ensure that they are still fit for emergency vehicles?
Oh, I think that's a good one for you, Richard. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as with anything, we fully support the fact of encouraging people to cycle more, making areas of the community more safer for pedestrians. That's absolutely a great thing to do. And we know, there are examples where this has worked really effectively and really well. Equally, we have to make sure whatever provision is put in place, it's easily accessible for the emergency services, and we all have different size vehicles. Be it for the fire service, the ambulance, or the police. And often, in an emergency situation, you don't have time to be able to find, be it keys or other types of facilities to get into those areas. So they need to be easily accessible. And it's the same with any kind of be it control measures where you put if it's speed humps in roads, whilst they have an effect, they clearly can have an impact on emergency vehicles. And so we have to take all that into consideration, but fully support the move to support the community and certainly for fitness and health.
Thank you. Matt, I don't know, one of the things I've noticed is people cycling on pavements. What are the rules around that?
Unless it's a joint pedestrian cycle route, you shouldn't be doing that. Derby is well served. There's still a lot of work to do to improve the situation. But no, unless it's specifically allowed for cycling, you have a blue circle sign with a pedestrian and a cycle on it, or there'll be a clearly lined cycle lane. You shouldn't be doing that. But on the point about emergency vehicles, I think I just need to make clear here that we are putting in. We've just received more than we asked for, actually, the funding, well over £200,000 from government for emergency COVID transport measures, and this is about creating safe space within the city centre, primarily, with a couple of outlying areas that we're going to run projects with. But for example, Corporation Street past the council house through to the Moorledge, we're going to actually close off the Moorledge so that only Hackney cabs and buses can travel down there.
Right.
But obviously emergency services are exempt from that. We're not going to stop emergency services accessing wherever they need to go with regards to the measures that we're putting in place, whether they be the temporary ones which we're going to run for 3 months and then review, or if we are going to make changes in the long term, such as one-way streets, or even in local areas where councils will be more involved with potentially looking at those kind of schemes. Clearly, we have to make sure that there's always the provision for emergency service access, and I'll be looking very closely at that. And I know that highways officers always have to make sure that everything they do adheres to those kind of principles. Otherwise, they won't be able to go ahead with the schemes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cal, I don't know whether you do you cycle or do you walk anywhere?
I tend to walk everywhere, and I don't really go on public transport. Not too good with buses. I fell off one a couple of times on the top deck. I mean,
you fell off. How did you fall off?
I was standing up, and the driver just quickly off he went. So I went
down the aisle, rolling down the aisle, right?
Yeah, not literally on top.
So you weren't Tom Cruise style on the top of the bus.
So I've always been a bit.
Yeah.
I've always been a bit unsteady on my feet on buses because of the jerky nature of them. So I've always avoided them. So whenever I've had to get into town and I've had no car, I've walked, taking the sights. But honestly, in relation to cycle routes and making them more pedestrian friendly, in an ideal world, we would all want that. But as it is at the moment, in relation to Derby, I wouldn't feel safe going around the streets of Derby on a bike because of the traffic, the congestion. Some of the roads are not in the best of states. I mean, Normanton, Chaddeston, you always have people complaining about the condition of the roads. And obviously in certain areas, things are being done where the new road sifters are being laid and all that. That's all great. But then you also have issues with water companies and electricity companies and gas companies digging up roads, not doing them at the same time or doing them, all around the year, and it's just causing people constant problems. Now, obviously, in relation to emergency vehicles, even if you did have perfect roads and everything was clear, emergency vehicles, sometimes they're not always there and they don't always get there in time. For example, sorry to bring this up, Richard, but a few years ago, sadly, I had a grandma of mine, a cousin's grandma, who had a stroke at our house, and we waited like 5 or 6 hours for an ambulance to arrive. I mean, you could have perfect roads for that. We would have made no difference. So there's a lot to consider and a lot to depend on. And, people just need to work together as to how to best how to get the best results and so on. So there's a lot to consider, but obviously everyone wants good roads, good public transport.
Yes.
The need to travel.
Yes. I'm going to Matt, I'm going to come to you in a minute about roads, and Richard, I'm going to come to you about ambulance service, because I think things have moved on. So certainly. Let me, Carl, just before we your views on cycling and pedestrians and making more friendly.
I think it's something that's been raised on most of the weekly Zooms that we've had. And I think, the current situations create an opportunity to trial some new systems in the city centre. And I think, Derby's always been a cycling city anyway. And I think, like Matt said, we've got some great infrastructure that can always be improved and enhanced. And this has just given us an opportunity to trial a few new ways of doing it. But I'm certainly seeing a lot more people out and about cycling, and if that advances that agenda, then great.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot more people out cycling, but I have noticed this last week so many more people back to driving again. Matt, road conditions.
You totally accept what Cal's saying, because I'm a cyclist, sorry. And one of the things which is coming soon for Derby is e-scooters, because the government are now allowing those trials to take place.
Yes.
One of my concerns is genuinely what Cal said, that as a cyclist, you know, sometimes towards the edge of the pavement and road, that area of where your double yellows are and a couple of foot either side sometimes can have some holes in it, and the surface can not necessarily be totally smooth. Normally that's fine, you know, it's never going to be absolutely perfect unless it's an absolutely new resurfaced road, which is, you know, we're slowly starting to do across the city as best we can. But yeah, it's my concern there that you've got a suspension and a bigger tyre, but with the e-scooters, we do have to start being very mindful about those routes, because if you hit, I would have thought if you hit, a bump in the road potentially on an e-scooter with the wheels being so smaller, then the dangers of potentially coming off there would be a lot higher. Now, obviously, we can overstate some of these issues because, you know, we are doing what we can to improve the infrastructure, and that's an ongoing program. And we are putting millions more in, but there's still millions more needed. And it's never going to be an issue which we completely solve overnight. But yeah, it's an absolutely fair point, because it's no good as promoting sustainable travel and saying, yeah, e-scooters, cyclists and everything else, but we've got to be mindful that people have got to feel safe on the roads or a joint pavement, so that, you know, when it's raining, you still want to go out there and you see a little puddle. What you don't want to do is go over the puddle and it be 3 inches deep because it was a hole. You want, you know, that's the kind of thing which we need to avoid at all costs. And, you know, take the point, and it is definitely a valid point, and we need to take it on board. We're getting tens of millions of pounds from government. We've already received it for lots of different travel options, and some of that is going to be improved infrastructure specifically for these users.
And on these, what are they called? E-scooters? On those?
Electric scooters,
Electric scooters. How will people, will they just sort of put some money in? Is that how it's going to work?
No, it's still emerging, but don't hold me on this, but this is the way I believe it's going to work. It's not like the e-bike, with the successful, actually, even though we had a problem with the vandalism and it had to end because of that, it was a successful scheme. So taking that principle of Derby will embrace this, whether it be e-bikes or e-scooters, the current thinking is that it's going to be a personal lease kind of idea. So you take ownership, a lease ownership of the e-scooter. So it'll be, you know, a really high quality machine. It's not going to be a toy.
Oh, right.
You know, and there'd be a lease option there where you could effectively you own it, if you like, on a period of time where you're actually leasing the vehicle. I don't know a lot more about that particular detail of how it's going to work, but that's the idea. My understanding is that rather than it be a rack of e-scooters in the middle of town where you use your app and then you pull one out of the thing and off it goes, it'd be something that actually you take sort of almost personal ownership of.
And just before I come to you, Richard, how fast do they go, Matt?
Well, that's another thing, fast.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, you know, on a bike, I can probably, if I'm going down a hill, I can hit probably 20 mile an hour or something like that, but I wouldn't feel safe going any faster than that. I'm not in that much of a rush. But these things, the e-scooters can potentially go that kind of speed and a little bit more, I think.
Wow.
So so that's something for me. Is I've actually asked officers, because we are actively sorting this out. There are issues, but I want to see it if it works. I've said, look, I want to get hold of one of these things because I cycle over the place, and some of the concerns Cal's mentioned a few, I would actually like to just experience that, to see, right, okay, I'm going to take a trip around Derby's roads and see what it's like. You know, does it feel faster than a cycle? Does it feel safer? Or what are the concerns? Do drivers take any, are they going to treat an e-scooter differently to a cyclist? All those things.
I'd love to have it. I mean, this is a whole. I'll come to you in a second, Cal, before we go to Rich, because I know before we finish on this. I'd love to have a go, because I am the biggest coward in the world. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of speed. I'm afraid of so many things. So if you could get me on something that's off the ground, that's going fast.
Yeah. If I can get hold of one, genuinely, if I get hold of one, then we'll all have a go.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, it's very important, because these things are going to be, you're not pedal power. You're going to be zipping around the place. It could be a very quick way of getting places. Believe me, me. However, pavement e-scootering is not going to be allowed, and that is something again which is a concern for me. It's about people taking ownership and responsibility for this new way of traveling. It will not work if people abuse it, go too fast in inappropriate areas, go on pavements and cut through traffic lights. All those things will be bad, obviously. But I'm hoping that actually the public will embrace it, but it doesn't come without challenges.
No, okay, thank you. Cal, you wanted to come in quickly before I go to Richard.
It was about pavement. Pavement riding. So,
and you can't put them on the tops of buses either, Cal, actually.
oh, that's a shame. But honestly, in relation to pavement riding, I mean, I was going to ask whether there was going to be a rule change that would allow for the scooters to be ridden on the pavements. But obviously, it depends on the power of the scooter as well. I mean, you're not going to use a really powerful one on the pavement. So obviously, these are some kind of next level type scooters.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. My approach for this, Cal, is a sensible one. If you can show me a pavement which is wide enough to safely take cyclists and pedestrians, and we can mark it out or put the signage up there, I'll certainly consider it. But it's a common sense thing. I would never want to have a mixture of cycle, scooters and pedestrians where it's not appropriate. You know, and when you've got a road like London Road, the whole stretch from sort of the Rolls-Royce area and Prescott Drive area all the way into town, we're going to put some better cycling, marked out cycle lanes, some temporary and probably permanent as well as part of this new package. And actually, if you can create space like that at the side of the road and it's safe, then that's where you should be, not on the pavement, no matter how wide the pavement is.
So Richard, I'm going to let you answer the question. Before that, in terms of accidents, do you see, I know horse riding accidents are very prevalent, but do you see a lot of cycle accidents, do you know? Do you monitor accidents?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a significant problem. So anything where you're putting cyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles all in the same environment, there's always going to be an increased risk. And we all know that speed is a major contribution to serious road accidents and indeed fatalities. And actually, what we've been talking about at the moment around e-scooters, one of the things we have to think about when we're mixing people together and pedestrians and cyclists and people on e-scooters, you've got to think about people, for example, hard of hearing or visually impaired. There's a real risk there where suddenly the speed, but somebody's on top of somebody, you've got a real issue. We know. Equally, we tell people to be very careful, make sure that they wear the appropriate equipment, so, cyclists with helmets, and it's absolutely clear. We know there are people whose lives have been saved by wearing a helmet on the bike, and equally, sadly, people have lost their lives through not wearing the appropriate equipment. So we know it's a big issue.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of, I just sort of some reassurance that the ambient service, I know it's been getting better and better, perhaps just quickly on Cal's question about the length of time.
Yeah, very much so. So, Cal, first of all, I'm sorry to hear of that experience. We were talking about roads and pedestrian areas at the time, and that is a small reason why there are delays with ambulance services. Yeah, there's a multiple number of reasons, be it to do with volumes of calls, types of calls, other factors where the ambulance service can't be available. But one thing I am pleased to say is the ambulance service in the East Midlands has changed significantly over recent years. Only last year we were rated by the CQC as good, with an outstanding for caring for the care that the crews are giving, and we are getting to much more people far faster than we ever have done, which is great. And that's as a result of lots of factors, lots of investment, lots of additional staff. But changes to the way we deliver our service as well, and long may that continue. We need to improve further, and we know through the current period of COVID that whilst it's been a phenomenally challenging time for the service and both the colleagues within the ambulance service and the patients we respond to, but we've got to patients far quicker than we ever have done. So lots of people have had a really, really fast response, and that's ultimately what we get there quickly and provide the high levels of care when we arrive.
Thank you. I'm going to actually, before we go on to the next question, Sophie, does anybody have any questions on COVID and the emergency service for Richard? Because it just strikes me that it's quite an unusual time for you. Has anybody got anything to ask Richard at all?
I'd just like to pass on my thanks to him and his staff. They've done a fantastic job, like all the key workers, and you really are at the front line, like many of the hospital workers are. So I know that a lot of people in my ward of Mickleover would like to pass on their thanks to you.
Thank you, and I'll absolutely make sure that is passed on. It's been for all of us, there has not been an off-the-shelf plan to deliver and respond to the crisis. I think day in, day out, we see some phenomenal acts where people do some extraordinary things. We know it's been a very troubling time. It's been very difficult for people, be it both professionally and personally. But I've been absolutely, overwhelmed by the sort of the dedication and determination demonstrated by everybody, and also that involves people who don't work in frontline patient-facing roles as well. We have to remember all the staff who work in the control room, the people who work in the services behind the scenes, and I think we know there's been challenges around things like PPE, and in the early days that was a really difficult time for everybody. But I'm pleased to say we've dealt with that very well, and not without its challenges, but we have dealt with it very well.
No, thank you. And again, just to reiterate, I think a big thanks from everybody. You guys have been incredible, absolutely incredible. All key workers have been incredible. So if you can have the next question.
Amanda.
Sorry, yes. Sorry,
no,
Carl, yes.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if Richard's seen the bench that was installed at the Derby Royal.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah, fantastic bench that's been gifted to the city, and there's a replica bench in Chellaston. And actually, it's a piece of art in itself, but there's a great depiction actually of an ambulance as part of that imagery that's been captured on that memorial bench. So definitely thank you from the city.
No, and thank you as well.
It's a brilliant bench. Go and have a look at it. Sophie, I think I've just seen a message pop up as well. Was there? Sorry.
Yeah, so we've got a message from Leon saying everyone has pulled together to protect the public as much as possible from COVID. Long may it continue in the East Midlands. So thank you, Leon. We've also got a question as well.
Thank you, Richard. That's great. Sorry. So next question then. Yeah.
How can we protect and increase the number of innovative, high-tech and high-skilled jobs?
Oh, right. Let's Carl, let's come to you first on that.
Well, I would say that there's a number of initiatives taking place at the moment, isn't there? And I think actually we normally have the update at the beginning of the week, beginning the session from Helen. And I know a lot of work's being done by Rolls-Royce and colleagues within the region around how we support those people who have been affected. And I think if we have a look at the moment, there's a very strong drive around the economic recovery in the city. And within that, there's a whole raft of different initiatives being developed in order to support people who are at this moment in time finding themselves in uncertain times when it comes to their employment. I suppose really that it's almost like an hour's debate in itself, isn't it? But certainly from what I'm linked in with, there seems to be a great deal of work being done to preserve the skills in the city, work with them and identify new opportunities. And I think actually a few weeks ago there was some potential good news on the horizon, Matt, as well.
Yeah, obviously the impact on the city is going to be severe. Let's not ignore that fact. Derby is going to be very significantly hit. Government recognise that. We recognise that. In terms of instant financial impact, we are quite severely hit, but nowhere near compared to some other authorities in our region even. So we've got challenges to face, but one of them is obviously the issues with our Rolls-Royce announcements, which we're all well aware of, and those skilled jobs. But I'm positive, and I'm a positive person, Amanda, anyway. It's always glass half full. And I think it's a good thing to have, but you've got to be a realist too. But genuinely, there is so much work going on behind the scenes with so many people, including local MPs like yourself, Amanda, and Pauline and Pauline Latham and Margaret Beckett. Everyone is pulling together via the City Council's task force, which has got the great and the good, and is expanding all the time and defining its work. I am confident that whilst I can't announce any particular, it's not necessarily my job, nor is it my place, because some of it doesn't directly involve the council, but there are really positive, potentially massive announcements for Derby coming. I really hope and believe there will be in the fairly short to medium term. Real big boost for Derby, not just in terms of employment, but in terms of the local economy as well. So whilst it is a challenge, I honestly believe that Derby is still going to be a place to be, and if you want high-tech skilled jobs. And I think that actually we've got a bright future once we've obviously dealt with the immediate impact of COVID and start to rebuild in terms of looking after those who are unfortunately going to lose their employment over this and may struggle. So yeah, I'm with that realism in place. There are some major, I believe, some major announcements coming down the line fairly soon, which will really give everyone a boost.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you, Cal, next. Just to mention that Helen's with us again next week, so she's doing an update and she'll be with us again next week. Cal, you know, what are your views on this from a sort of Derby rescue package?
Well, obviously, a company such as Rolls-Royce is having to let go of so many of its workforce, and it's going to have a really negative effect on the city and the people, because the people that do work for Rolls-Royce, those that will be laid off, they've obviously got families that they need to support. They've got homes that they need to, you know, keep paying the mortgage on and so on. So if they are going to go, you would hope that a company as big as Rolls-Royce could, you know, help them out in such a way that they are able to suggest to these folks where else they can find jobs. The support needs to be there. They can't just let them go. It might be a case that once all this pandemic is over, Rolls-Royce can bring them back in to the equation and, you know, provide them with jobs. We'd hope they could do that. But in the meantime, when they are not in work, you would hope that Rolls-Royce and other big companies can, you know, support them. And that's all I wish for, that these people that are being laid off are being supported well enough.
Yes, and it's interesting. If Helen were here, I know that last week she gave us an update, and she was saying that it was they were hoping it was all going to be from voluntary severance. I don't know how that's gone, but I'm sure she'll fill us in next week. But one of the things certainly that we've been pushing for from a Derby point of view is making sure that anybody who takes a severance or is made redundant is given some support. We've been working quite closely with Unite. I know we've had conversations on that front as well. And I think as well, if I recall, somebody was saying, so we can maybe, you know, move people to different areas. I think you're quite right, Cal. You know, how do we look at opportunities elsewhere? And correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but the Derby Recovery Plan is all about that, seeing if we can even use Infinity Park and things like that.
It's retaining the skill base, because there's some highly skilled people within Rolls-Royce, and there's going to be a small percentage that were ready to retire, or, you know, it was their time, and it doesn't necessarily affect them. It's just a little bit earlier than probably they planned, and I know Rolls-Royce have a way to deal with that. But those who aren't ready, who have got still a career ahead of them, that they until COVID hit was settled. Cal's right. Then obviously, as Rolls-Royce get back on the feet in terms of their civil aviation, which is, I think, you know, 3 to 5 years. I think I might be wrong.
That's what Helen said, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. The other side of the business is that are very strong. The nuclear and military, or whatever, or civil defence. Sorry, but my point is, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but my point is that we are working very closely with Rolls-Royce. Say we, the task force, the council, the stakeholders, and we're all working together to ensure that we retain those skills within the city, whether that be to encourage and invest in startup businesses, or take those skills that they can actually apply to a completely different industry, but is obviously very relevant to them. And that's what I'm talking about here. There's lots of pockets of work already going on. But also there's some really big things that are going on behind the scenes here that I strongly believe, if they come to fruition, that many of those workers with those skills will be able to actually find employment and stay within the city, as in for work, because many of them work. When we say Derby, we talk about the boundary, which is fairly compact, but Derby folk, as Cal would say, is much wider. And so we want to retain that whole skill base, because we are the engine of the UK. We're a manufacturing high-tech city, and, you know, we need to double down on that. And if we can do that, we can retain all of those people, and they will be back in employment and actually contributing into our economy, which is exactly where we need to be.
I think I'm going to come to you next, Richard, but just on this subject. But just to say, I don't think we say it often in the faction, that just to thank you for the work that you do. I know I've been on the meetings, and there's so much good stuff that is going on. I work with lots and lots of different cities, as you can imagine, and Derby is really on point in terms of they've got the recovery plan, they're talking to people, it's all the right people doing it. And I do think the people of Derby, and I include all of you in this, thank you for all that you do. But we do seem a very positive city, and every guest that we've had on, people are saying, do you know what, let's try and do something positive for the community. So thank you. I don't know if we say it often enough, Matt, but thank you.
I'm not here to be thanked. At the end of the day,
No.
the people that really matter to, whatever. But the people that really matter to me are the really hard-working officers we have within the council, like Carl and many others. There's thousands of unsung heroes there just doing this work, grinding it out day after day after day. Now, they've worked really hard over the last 5 months preparing for COVID and dealing with COVID. You will not believe, well, you will, because how hard they've worked and the challenges they've faced, and some of it might be there's a little thing going on that might expose some of that work in a very positive light, but many of it just goes on behind the scenes, and it isn't. People like, I've said this before, people like me come and go. There'll be another Matthew Holmes, deputy leader of the council, whenever. It won't be, it'll happen. And these people just are leading the city in with their political steer of their manifesto and seeking a mandate from the public. But at the end of the day, the council officers are the ones that are just constantly working on. So for me, I'd like to thank them. We're just there, sort of trying to steer things in the right way. But there's some great work going on by many people.
Absolutely. And Carl, I hope I say often enough, thank you. You are great. You know that. I believe I'm seeing you tomorrow as well, so we can, thank you for the action.
Well, I'll certainly feed that.
No, honestly, it's really, really great, everything. Just shows you, I just, what an amazing effort everybody's doing. Richard, I'm going to come to you next before we go on to the next question, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think clearly it's a hugely troubling time and worrying time for many people, and I think certainly as years go by, we see examples of where there's been changes in other occupations. So that could be, for example, in mining, or it could be the steel industry, where actually, and I think this is almost for people to consider that there are also alternative types of careers, and I think what we have through COVID is some really actions where people have been caring for one another and supporting, and over time, I'd love people to join the ambulance service or consider careers in the health sector, where they may be able to put some of those skills to good use, and maybe consider a career in the public sector. And that's something which we will always be recruiting. We've recruited across the East Midlands nearly 500 frontline staff over the past year, and people don't necessarily need any prior experience coming into the environment. But so that's clearly a terrible time for many people, and my heart goes out to those at this time. But if there's any way we can support or help, then love to do so.
That is, again, it's encouraging to hear. And one of the things as you know, I work in science as well, and one of the things that we've been doing this week is launched a roadmap, and what it's all about really is just making sure that what we do is we keep our R&D offer, that with this science superpower, and certainly nowhere really demonstrates that as well as Derby. And one of the things that is within the roadmap is about levelling up, and it's about all having opportunity for everybody throughout the country. And I'm really, really keen to make sure that we do that. Sophie, next question.
So the next question is, how do we prevent illegal raves from gathering, and how do they contribute to peaks?
Well, I've never been to a rave in my life, I don't think, but as anybody, does anybody have any knowledge on this? Maybe we need to come to you first, Sophie. I don't know. I'm
not getting involved in illegal raves. No.
I mean, I've been to ones, but not illegal ones.
What is it? I mean, how many people go to a rave, Sophie, out of interest?
I mean, it depends where you go and how many people, but hundreds, thousands.
Oh, really? And can you avoid people?
No, absolutely not. And obviously it's sweaty. It's horrible.
You painted a great picture. Cal, do you have a view on this at all?
I've never been to an illegal one. I've never been to a legal one, I don't think. But obviously, during this period of pandemic, that's the last thing you want, where all these people come together and congregate. So how can we prevent these things from happening? Well, the only thing we can really do is if we happen to have any information of one that is going to take place, the best thing to do would be to alert the authorities, the police, the council, and say, look, I think there's an illegal rave that is going to happen. This is where it's going to happen. Off you go and do something about it. I mean, what more can you do?
Well, I'm going to come to you, Matt, again,
Stay away.
because you're saying alert the council, but Richard,
well, yeah, we would, of course, Amanda. I mean, this is the thing. And if anyone has any concerns at all, and it has happened over many issues, it doesn't have to be like a group of people. There's so many different concerns over the pandemic and social distancing and queries about whether a business should be or shouldn't be open and all that kind of thing. And Carl's dealt with, I would have thought, quite a lot of those kind of things. But like Carl's absolutely right. The authorities, I would very much assume they will be cracking down on anything like that because of the health risks. Why anyone would want to go to one of those, why they put themselves in that situation is one thing, but certainly there's, the police and the council, we're there to take that report and deal with it very quickly.
Yeah, I'm going to come to you next after Richard, Carl. But Richard, have you had to deal with any COVID-related emergencies? I mean, do you get called out for that purpose? And how, I don't really, because I haven't met anybody who I know has had COVID-19, and it must be fairly terrifying, is what I'm thinking to see. And if people saw the impact of going to a rave, is it a sensible thing, do you think?
No, and I think this is one of the problems, isn't it? Because people they will often think this is not going to happen to them, and we hear so many examples of where people are saying, if only this hadn't have happened, if only I hadn't taken these actions. And we know that COVID is indiscriminate, so there are no rules, there are no boundaries. And the basic thing is we urge people not to go to places where they are in close proximity. Things were, as Sophie was saying, where if it's a sweaty environment and everyone's close together, it's clearly going to exacerbate the issues. There's other associated issues with things like raves where sadly they tend to attract drug abuse or alcohol abuse, and they can often be in difficult to reach locations, so that puts even more pressure on an already stretched and emergency services and how we get to those. And if people were to see and experience what's happening with some of those patients, and sadly we know families have been affected through COVID directly, where they've lost loved ones, and that is heartbreaking. And we just urge people to be sensible. We know what we're seeing at the moment in the media, that there are the potential for some peaks, and there is the potential that's been attributed to people not necessarily socially distancing. So we just urge people to do everything they can to not break the rules. They're there for a reason. It's not just not just for the sake of it.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring in about Leicester in a minute, actually. But Carl, your views on this.
I just kind of echo what everyone else has said, really. We have been working closely with our partners at Derbyshire Constabulary around where we've received reports of people not social distancing, but it comes back to that sense of taking some personal responsibility for your actions. Nobody goes you kicking and screaming to the rave. You need to ask yourself, you might feel as if you're immune to it as a younger person, but it's who you then come into contact with. And it's just that common sense approach. I think at the moment it's obviously heightened in the media. These are kind of events that occur frequently across the UK. I think they're being heightened at the moment in the media because of the social distancing guidelines. And hopefully, actually, what that does is have an impact whereby people start to see it and think twice themselves about going. And I think, Richard's right. If only some of those people could see actually the harrowing effect that it is having on those people who contracted the disease. So, but I'll just say again, if you do have any intelligence, if you do have any kind of information, please do share it with us. Phone us either at Derby City Council 01332 640 000, or equally, if you go to Derbyshire Constabulary's website, there is a way in which you can report stuff there as well anonymously.
Thank you. And just before we go on to the next question, which I was just looking at the time, may well be our last question. Views on Leicester. I mean, do we have any views to, you know, Richard, do you know what, have you seen it happening? I just appreciate, you know, we don't want lockdown like that coming back in Derby. Other things we can do. How's it happened? Any thoughts?
I think all we've been describing around, you know, the basic ask of social distancing, you know, personal hygiene, washing your hands, wearing, you know, the face protections, the face masks. But, you know, they're the simple things to do, and actually sticking to within the guidelines. I think that's the big ask from everybody. And you know, what we're seeing is everybody has been so supportive of the NHS, and you know, on a Thursday evening in the prior weeks, we're standing on the doorsteps and showing that recognition, and then the next day would go and kind of sort of breach the guidelines, which kind of doesn't really go hand in hand with people to really kind of stick within the guidelines at the moment. We know, you know, every bit of the East Midlands has got its own unique challenges, and some areas are quite densely populated, and versus, you know, some areas are quite rural. But what we're trying to say to everyone is, please stick to what you've been asked to do so. And even this weekend, we know there's a real urgent desire for people to get out there and get to be at the pubs and whatever it may be. But please apply common sense, because COVID hasn't gone. It's not disappeared. It does still. It's still in the community.
Yeah. I think you talk about going to pubs. I believe I'm pulling a pint at the Wilmot Arms. Is that right, Sophie, on Saturday? So
on
that's
Saturday, yeah, but just before the football.
Just before the football, my goodness. Anyway,
is there a game on this weekend, Amanda?
I believe there is. I think so. Cal, your thoughts? Any other further thoughts on Leicester before we move on to the next question?
Obviously, if Derby's numbers and Nottingham's numbers match anywhere near what Leicester has been, what's happening in Leicester recently, then it might be a case that, yeah, Derby and Nottingham too have to go into lockdown again. So it's just one of those cases that if it's based on scientific information, scientific data, and they tell you it's the best thing to do, then the quicker you can implement that, the better for all. There's no point hanging around, you know, waiting these extra couple of days. Just get it in lockdown. Whether Derby or Nottingham go towards a second lockdown, obviously, we won't know until those numbers come out again. But obviously, Leicester's obviously in a very difficult situation at the moment. So
it's funny. You just reminded me. It's a whole new way of life. I've got my you know, hand cleansing gel here. I don't think we move without it, do we? You know, I used to have maybe hand cream, and now it's cleansing gel that we all take with us. Any further thoughts on that, Carl or Matt?
I just add that, you know, obviously all local authorities now, including Derby, have contingency planning. You know, we are prepared should that eventuality happen. I'm not saying it will. I can say hand on heart that we're not in a position where we're feeling that we're going to have to go the same way as Leicester right now. So I can give that reassurance to the public. But like I say, we need to all work together on this and ensure that we're following all the things that we've been doing over the last 13 or more weeks now. Please don't just think that this is over. It isn't. And if we all stick together and carry on doing the things that we've done for so long, and actually, you know, maybe just have a think, say, well, okay, I'm going to really make an effort now, because let's be honest. The longer this goes on, you know, your 20-second hand wash turns into a 10-second hand wash, and then a 5-second. You know, there's that danger, and so on and so forth. So let's just all have just a pause for thought here and say, let's just go back to what we were doing to beat this in the first place, or at least get it down, get us past the peak. And that's what we do. And if we do that, we're in a really good shape as a city. And I think that's all we can do, you know, as local residents and residents of the city, and, you know, and look after Derby first and foremost. And I think, I'm positive about it, but we need to remember that it's still out there, and it only needs a chance to start spreading very quickly. And, you know, as Cal says, we've seen what happens to a certain degree in Leicester, and I'm sure it won't be the first. It's not the first. Well, sorry, it is the first, but it probably won't be the last area or in pockets that has to deal with this as we move forward towards a vaccine. But there's no danger of that in Derby.
And do you know, it's we do have to adhere to, you know, the government guidelines. as you know, I've got a granddaughter who's 7 months, and I just can't wait. I've said it before, to just hold her and squish her and kiss her and lots of things. But I haven't, for the last 3 months, and it's heartbreaking. At least now she knows that I just don't live in a telephone. She actually can see me physically. But we've just come so far, and I want to be able to grow up with, I want to see her grow up. And that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's about saving lives and
the
staying
government
safe.
The government have got a hell of a job on their hands, because at the end of the day, there's criticism from like, are we doing it too soon? And all that, or then there's then there's pressure. We need to start, supporting businesses and start to try and get to some kind of new normal. And I don't envy those in charge nationally at all, because it's a very, very difficult path to tread, and everyone can hopefully just do the right thing and work on this together as a whole nation, and we can get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a balanced economy and lives. Carl, anything else to add?
Just very simply, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. And I think actually, yeah, I just know a lot of people now who can't wait to go out for a bit of retail therapy, and they're shopping at stores that they could still do that online. And to me, that they've had the experience of shopping online for 15 weeks. Suddenly, why now there's a desire to run into a clothing store is beyond me. But yeah, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And the rule, the guidance still is stay alert. And it covers everything we've talked about earlier, whether that's social gatherings, creating a bubble, and certainly then, pushing your luck with large gatherings of people where it's not going to be possible to stay distance. And so if everybody continues to do their bit, I'm sure we will get out of this a lot quicker, with a lot less tragedy.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one more question, I think, Sophie. I can't believe where the time's gone. Oh, we're going to have to make it quick as well. What's the last question?
So we've got July is Plastic Free Month. What steps will you be taking to reduce your plastic consumption?
Right. Let's come to Cal first. What steps are you going to take?
Well, just carry on as we're doing as a family. You buy stuff in that has the least amount of plastic to contain it, so it's just a matter of just carrying on as we are. Obviously, you're not going to totally ban plastic from coming into your household, but it's also dependent on the manufacturers and industry and what they put out there. Maybe they need to do more to implement organic packaging and so on, so make it easier for us, take the decision out of our hands.
Yeah, well, yes. Well, there's a whole debate around that. I agree, and I was just thinking, actually, I'm going to come to you all just before the end to ask for one piece of advice. So just to get you thinking before we just go round on this plastic. But it was interesting. I know that I think it was last year or the year before. Pauline Latham was telling me that they'd gone plastic free in Parliament, and it was pretty much impossible to do it. It really was, and it's exactly like you're saying, Cal. You probably there's at some point there's something plastic that comes into your house, really. Richard, what about yourself?
So from an ambulance service perspective, we've been trying to do an awful lot around the whole green agenda, and we're trying to really support the environment. An example of what we've been doing on the back of the wonderful actions of Captain Tom and the money that's been raised for the NHS. We're having sort of water coolers and issuing out bottles to staff so that people are not having to have reusable bottles, etc. But at the same time, almost inadvertently, because of all the PPE, we're actually having more plastic. So there's a little bit of means to an end at the moment, but we'll get there. We're absolutely doing a lot as an organisation to sort of improve our carbon footprint as well, as an example. So a lot's happening behind the scenes.
Good to know. Thank you, Carl.
I'm a little bit obsessed with recycling at home anyway, so I'm a bit the same. If I can buy it and it's not wrapped in something, I will do. But I've kind of made it my mission. There's a couple of my neighbours that don't recycle as much as they really should. So I think I'm going to take away a bit of an action to try and encourage them to be a bit more pro-recycling, and that can be very well worthwhile if I can get that.
Good idea, really good idea. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, that's the key for me. Carl's just hit on the nail on the head there. Of course, we've got to reduce plastics, and I think science probably will be able to find a way to do that. But it's about when we have to use plastics, or we do use plastics, that they're recycled. And that Derby is not just a cycling city, but a recycling city.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, there you go. There's a
And
slogan for you.
we had a dip. I won't go into the reasons that I believe why we had a dip, but we're working really hard now to actually re-establish ourselves as a really strong recycling city, because the residents have proved over the last decade or so that they really, with support and encouragement, they will embrace that. And that's, for me, the first thing is you cannot be chucking it in your black bin. That's how it's going to pollute the environment, because it lasts for hundreds of years, more in some cases. So for me, recycling is the absolute minimum we've got to be doing in terms of a city and a nation, and worldwide as well. Because if it can reuse, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for anyone in Derby, I believe, that can have a blue bin to properly recycle and take that effort to do that, because it is inexcusable to just be dumping plastic in a black bin. Because we need everybody to play their part, and I think that'd be my message is to please, the people who are doing it now, fantastic, keep it up. Those who maybe need a bit of encouragement, please, you're letting the side down. You really need to help us with this.
Yeah, do you know, you raise a really important point. I went down the London sewers, which sounds revolting, and it is fairly horrible down there, I can say. But I was looking at the Victorian architecture, which actually is an amazing feat. But the one thing that absolutely depressed me to the core was the amount of all the plastic that you saw down there. And it is, we are destroying the planet. And, when we talk about all the animals and in the sea and everything, it is absolutely heartbreaking that some of these animals could be extinct because of what we do. And I would even suggest that some of it is just careless and lazy, because we've all said, I think you said it really well, Matt, if you've got a blue bin, use it. And do you know what as well? I know that they take recycled things in boxes as well, so it's not as even, if you overflow, you can still sort of put some rubbish out. I unfortunately realised the time is gone, so I just would like to just come round and get a word, one sentence of sort of wisdom from all of you. Sophie, what's your words of wisdom this week?
Recycle, reduce plastic.
Oh, I thought it was don't go to a rave, but yeah.
Or don't go to a rave, yeah, especially not illegal ones.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Richard, what about your words of wisdom?
For me, it's just be safe, follow the guidelines, and don't put yourselves or others at risk.
Thank you very much. Cal?
It's good to talk at a distance. It's good to engage. It's good to share experiences and learn from people.
Yeah, great words. Carl?
If you need any support at all, please phone us at the Derby Direct Community Hub number 01332 640 000.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Matt?
Listen, everybody, this ain't over. So do not lose sight. It's a big weekend for the country and everything else, but please don't turn it into something negative. Socially distance, hygiene, all the things which we have been drilled into us over the last, and quite rightly, over the last few months. Don't just abandon them. Socially distance, and all of those things, because if we don't, we're going to be in real trouble. So just please be mindful, especially this weekend and moving forward.
Thank you so much to all of you. Before we go, Sophie, who have we got next week?
I'm not sure, actually.
I ask Sophie this every week, and it's always, I just need to know. Don't worry, Sophie.
Around a lot, that's why. But the
great thing is, we know we've got Carl, hopefully. We know we've got Matt, hopefully. Cal and Richard, I hope you come back at some point as well. I hope you've had it's been great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invite.
And stay safe. It's been wonderful to see. Look, a bit of a virtual hug going on, but thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Amanda. Bye.
Bye.